Hello and welcome back to Tabletop TV. My name is Alex, and in this video we're going to go over building the Patricians gang from the World's Fair Afterparty 2-player Carnevale starter box. Let's get started. Alright, so building the Patricians. Let's kick off with building the household staff. So looking at the instructions in the sprue, that is model E, which is this one here. Should be only a handful of parts. I think it's only 5? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yep. Okay, so let's get those clipped off. And we've got his, I think it's a fire poker. Kind of looks like a bill hook of some sort, but it's obviously far too short for that. So yeah, my guess is it's a fire poker. Okay. Same as with the Doctor's videos, we're then just going to clean up the models, just looking over them. We're obviously going to carve out what's left of these little connection points, and then we'll scrape down any mold lines, paying especially attention to any smooth areas, like, say, his shins, the back of his legs as well, and so on. Areas where we may not see the mold line at the moment when the mold's unpainted, but when we get to painting it, we'll really notice them. So, better to be thorough now than annoyed later. As a rule, if you're not sure if you've got the connection point, just dragging your fingernail or the edge of a knife gently over it. If you feel any friction, do a little bit more scraping. If it feels smooth, it's good enough. If you're in a hurry, if you're building a whole army for something, then maybe scraping mold lines is not as important, but Carnevale is a skirmish game. You're usually going to have between 4, 5, maybe 10 models at the absolute most, so it is worth getting them all looking their best, doing a bit of extra effort. So for me, at least, a big part of the appeal is that because it is a skirmish game, every single model's a character, and you can really spend your time painting them and get them to look their absolute best. There we go, that's his body done. Onto his little apron. And here, you're not going to find any mold lines really because of how it goes on the sprue, so it's just a case of finding, cutting off, and then scraping down the connection points. So on his head, single connection point I think it was, just there on the top of the head. So I'm just going to scrape that way. Making sure to scrape in the direction the hair goes so I don't obliterate detail by doing this. So maybe I don't press the camera, you can see what I mean. By scraping it this way, we're going to remove that contact point and just avoid, again, destroying any detail. And then we've got his absolutely tiny little ponytail. Which again, really should just be a case of remove the contact point so it can socket properly into the back of his head. And then, yeah, his fire poker. There's a household staff, as you can probably tell by the name. They are the staff, the servants of the Patricians. So while they are still, they're kind of members of high society, they're going to certainly have a very posh accent, but they're not going to be carrying gilded rapiers and professionally made pistols and so on. They're going to be using standard tools. So this guy's case, whatever this lump of metal is, might not be very fancy. I would still prefer not to be hit with it. So putting them together, they are plastic models, so we could use super glue, but we don't need to. Plastic glue will actually be better here, because it will essentially melt the plastic and then rebond it into a single piece. So usually when building a model, you do want to dry fit it. So step 1 in the instructions is just put his apron on. It goes that way round. There we go. You can see it attaches. I can see. Hopefully my camera will focus. There we go. It attaches just below his belt. Nice and simple. So a little bit of plastic glue here, don't need too much. Pop it in place. Press it into place with my fingertip. If I couldn't get in there, I could use the flat of my blade to push it in as well, but obviously this is quite accessible. There we go, that's glued on. Now, I've just noticed there was a little bit of a contact point there that I seem to have missed on his shin. So I'm just going to scrape that flat quickly. Should be able to do so without interfering with the apron I just put on. Much better. Alright, then we glue on his weapon hand. It's probably more glue than we need. If you get more glue than you need, you can just wipe some of it off with something like a knife blade, because we really don't need much. What you don't want to do is put on too much glue, push the parts together, and have the glue then explode out of the gap all over the detail. Just goes on like that. Right, then we add the head. I'll pop him down for a second. Pop him face down is probably easier so we don't bend his weapon arm. Grab the head, look at how it goes on. And it is just a single connection point on the back of his neck there. So, easiest thing to do is probably to put a bit of glue on his neck. Grab the head. He's facing the direction of his weapon. He's almost fencing with it, in fact. In fact, given who he is, he's almost certainly fencing with it. So we'll put it there, and then because it's essentially a flat contact point, we can then rotate it to the direction we want. So we can make the angle he's looking at really, really quite extreme. There we go. I think that's the angle. Yeah. Cool. And then we attach his ponytail. I can probably push that in while that's drying. So tiny bit of glue into that socket on the back of his head. And his ponytail goes down, going to the instructions, and sort of toward his left shoulder. Right, who's next? Then we go on to the cat burglar. So this is our Baroni's associate. Very nimble guy in the game, very high dexterity, very high movement. So he's very much your rooftops character. And it looks like he is model B. So that is going to be this section here. And it's 6 parts, I believe. So just this section here. As we mentioned in the Doctor's video, you'll find the models are grouped together on the sprues, which is really nice as a model builder. Sometimes you'll be building models and you'll find the bits you need are all over the place or even on multiple different sprues. Here, we've really tried to make it user-friendly, so when you're looking for the parts you need, they're all going to be clustered together, to the extent they can be anyway. So what we've got a torso. He's got his own ponytail. Very fashionable in Venice in the 1700s. He has a stiletto, I think, or a dagger, some sort of stabby implement. He's got another dagger sheathed at his belt, I think. So here's the thing. For a little piece like this, where you've got 2 contact points and one is very, very, very thin, what you don't want to do is clip the thin one first, or you might find you'll bend it. So I find the best thing to do is to clip off any other connection points first. So clip it here, and now if I clip here, it's not going to bend under its own weight. There we go. And what's this last part? Interesting. Okay, that's part A5. So that's supposed to go on the... Who's that supposed to go on? Oh, okay. That piece there I've actually missed. That goes on the Electron Cannoneer because, as you can see, section A here. So I completely missed that. We'll just clip that off, give that a clean up, and attach that to the Doctor's Cannoneer in a moment. You will find there are no sort of alternative options on the sprue, so you will use the entire sprue. If you've got bits left at the end, they should be somewhere on a model. Right. That is now everything for the cat burglar cut out. Let's sort out that electron cannoneer before we forget. So this is another... In fairness, she's already got a few pouches, so I can be forgiven for missing it, but just clean up those connection points. I think the instructions are fairly idiot-proof. I've just looked at them. They do literally go step by step. Just not quite idiot-proof enough for me, apparently. Right, where does this go? This goes this way up with the belt pouch at the top. And attaches... Okay, there we go. Just slots in like that on her hip there. And now I'm looking, I can see there's some flat texture, or flat lack of texture there, where the rest of the model is obviously incredibly detailed, so should have known that something was amiss. There we go, no harm, no foul. Right, back to the Patricians part of the video. So, cleaning up the cat burglar. So you'll see here with this model, there was a mold line going down the edge of his boot, but then we've actually worked the mold line for the rest of it up into the sculpt. So that line there isn't a mold line, that's part of the piping on his trousers. Again, it's quite cleverly concealed. You will find there are hardly any to worry about on smooth areas, like the smooth parts of his boots. There is a necessity of how the product's made. They just need to clean them up. Alright, here's tiny knife. Nope. Had two connection points, one on the scabbard, sheath. There. And there's one on the very tip of the pommel of the knife, which honestly is so small, I would say it's not even worth trying to do anything with, because that's essentially flat, and if I do try and carve that away or scrape it smooth, I'm going to be scraping like this, and I'm very likely to bend or snap that very, very small hilt. So I'm going to say that's fine. Then we've got his hand, holding his little stolen pouch. His knife. Again, whether it's a stiletto or a dagger. I think all stilettos are daggers, not all daggers are stilettos. Tell me in the comments. But whatever it is, his stabby implement. This is again another part where we want to make sure we really get this smooth, because otherwise, because it's obviously a geometric shape with quite a hard edge, if we have a contact point visible there, it'll really show up when we get to painting him. But pretty simple. Carve it out, scrape it smooth. Done. One nice thing about these, the more humanoid characters in this box anyway, a lot of them do have things like separate heads, separate arms in terms of how they go together, which means if you've got spare parts in your bits box from the rest of your Carnevale collection, or if you've joined our My Mini Factory tribe, and you can obviously print as many models as you want, you can very easily swap parts around. So if you want to have him holding a sword rather than a dagger, or swap his head over for a different head from a different model you have, dead easy to do. Plastic's obviously very forgiving. 3D printed resin, a little bit less so, but it's still not too difficult. You can still cut sand things smooth and so on quite easily. Right, let's figure out how we put this guy together. So, step one is to glue on his knife arm there. Don't even need to dry fit this, it's pretty obvious how it goes together. I guess got it up across his body, ready to defend himself. There we go. Yeah, once it goes, you'll be able to tell you got it in the right place because it will just socket into position properly, like it just has there. Just going to scrape away a little bit of that excess glue. Then we add his pouch armor. Then we add his head. And where's he looking? He's sort of looking over his right shoulder. It looks like it'll socket into place. It's get in position, then wiggle it around a bit until it sits properly, like so. Then his ponytail goes in the back of his head, then his dagger. I'm actually going to do his dagger first, just so the head's got a bit longer to sit. And that literally just goes across the small of his back with the hilt on his left, so he could draw and fight with both daggers at the same time if he wanted. Just going to put a little bit of glue there. Don't need much, just a tiny, tiny bit. There we go. And then just poke it into place properly. Just so it is flush with the small of his back, so it will stay in place. Like that. And then a little bit of glue in the back of his skull. And glue on his ponytail. That is the cat burglar. Right, on to number 3, which is the hired muscle. This is the bruiser of the Patricians gang, and that is Model D, and that's quite clearly this section here. And then we've got Barnabotti is the one we're going to finish on. So with things like the small little knife, or any small parts like this, it's a good idea when you clip off the last part, just hold on to it. The number of pieces I've heard ping across the room is quite upsetting. I think I mentioned in the doctor's video. So to save this video being 2 hours long while I rummage around trying to find a bit, just hold on to it. Haven't missed any bits. No bits that should be on other models. Nope, good. Alright, let's get her cleaned up. Here's the first model we've had where the contact points are on the bottom of the feet. That's a great place for contact points, there'll be no detail there, but make sure you get them flat, just so models stick to whatever base you're putting them on. These shoulders are, again, they're flat surfaces, so we want to make sure we get them smooth. I think they're either plate armor or boiled leather, maybe. Leather probably makes more sense than plate. Some people do wear plate in Venice. The Vatican Knights are famous for wearing it, which is great protection, but not so great when you fall in the water. So most characters, they could be wearing things like, leather and tough hide or thick clothing more than full body armor. You'll see chainmail around occasionally as well, but yeah, full plate is usually the domain of the Vatican's knights, some of the really heavy Strigoi fighters, that sort of thing. Or mech suits. There is one Doctor's model, the Master of Arcane Security, who has her own mech suit, which also counts as full plate. As we saw with the household staff with the head, just make sure to scrape in the direction the hair goes. Don't scrape like this. And lastly, her backup dagger, because you can never have too many weapons. And once again, as with the cat burglar, there is a connection point here on the back of the pommel, but I really don't want to be too aggressive with it. Actually, what I'm going to do here, I put it flat on my cutting mat, and then just, it's not even a millimetre, we're cutting off a fraction of a millimetre probably, just slicing down, just to get it properly flat, like so. Let's get her built. So, we are starting by gluing the torso together. You can see there are guide holes here, where they push together. So I'm going to put a bit of glue in each of those holes, and then a little bit around here. I don't need to do the entire seam. I don't want to either, or I'll have glue flow out when I push together. But a little bit is worth doing. Right, then we add her empty hand, then her sword hand. So empty hand is held out behind her, again, sort of fencing style. She might be a thug, but hired muscle, but professional soldier, professional fighter is probably more accurate than thug. Is it meant to be further over? Look at a picture, I think, I'm actually meant to rotate at 90 degrees. I'll pull it back out again. There we go, that's better. It's just holding it sort of flat toward her opponent. Like so. Okay, her scabbard, you can see where it goes there. It sockets into that socket. Her backup dagger goes around here, so on her belt, going this way. I don't think it has any detail on one side more than the other, so we can just quite literally press it on, like so. Perfect. And then her head. Right, that is her done, so that's the hired muscle finish. She should be okay just to sit like that. Oh, I've missed a... Oh, it's not a mold line. There's now a seam there between the front and the back of her trousers. So I could come back to, before I glue on the base, I'll just straighten that down a little bit once the glue is fully cured. I want to leave it alone for now. You don't want to mess with it while the glue is curing, or you can pull the glue all over the place, strew in detail, and so on. Alright, and then, in my opinion, the coolest model in the box, certainly the prettiest model. What I'm looking forward to painting the most is the Barnabotti. So this is the rest of the sprue, basically. Relatively complicated, but shouldn't be too bad. So let's get her clipped off. I think the main thing is that's taking up such space and parts is trying to, well, making it so that her dress works on essentially a 2D plane, like a sprue. If this was a cast model, it would be just a single piece, most likely. But to make it work with plastic takes a bit more ingenuity. And it is, of course, a great big dress, and quite frankly, impractically large dress for knife fighting in the streets. But that's what she does. This part here is an interesting one. So this looks like this is how she attaches... Oh, this is the bottom of her dress. So we're going to sort of build a cone around this, because those are her shoes, and it goes that way up. Make sure not to miss her face there. There's a separate part. Well, it's not a separate part. It's still grouped together. It's not in the same segment there. And then this looks like the back of her torso, most of her head, and most of, but not all of her hair. And then what have we got? We've got a dueling pistol from the looks of it, her free hand, and her hairpiece. Which is, as you can see, a tiny, tiny, tiny little boat. Alright. I think that is an empty sprue. Let's hop that there. Get these parts cleaned up. So actually here, I've just put the clippers down, but here you can see the very large connection points. I'm just going to clip that off before I go in with a knife. Make things slightly easier for ourselves. I want to be careful here because I don't want to hit that filigree. So I'm carving very gently, just removing small bits at a time. Then scraping down the opposite direction. It's not quite smooth yet, let's do a bit more. Smooth down the, to be fair, very few more lines on this piece, but there are a couple. Areas like this we don't need to be too neat because this whole piece will be covered up except for the bottom of the heels, maybe. So I don't need to worry too much about getting this perfectly smooth, but I do need to remove the connection points just so the dress fits, I presume, flush around it. So here, we've got obviously this very detailed texture and a connection point just there at the very edge of it, so I'm going to scrape this way, just so I'm not going to carve away this detail by going that way. Alright, let's get that assembled. Where do we start? Okay, start with building the dress. So we need, here's the downside of cutting all the bits off, working out which bit is which bit. It looks like I get these two parts first, then add this part here that's got the sort of top part of the dress, then add the very textured bit on top, and then finally add that on the bottom. That'll give us essentially as a cone of dress. Then we do the front of the dress. So if I hold it here, I should be able to do glue along all the seams. What's probably easiest here might be to actually just put it, let's put it flat on the table. There we go, that's the way to do it. Because then I can push from 3 directions at once and it can't go down, so I can lock it into place like that. Very good. Then the top of the dress goes, well, on top, as one would expect. A bit of glue around that section. A little bit of glue here and there. There we go. Perfect. And then glue on her feet. Make sure we get them the right way around. I think we can't do it wrong because these little things here will socket into those there. Yeah, quite a feat of engineering doing that with plastic. Right. Oh, it's not rough. Then this part goes into here. There we go. Right, on to page 2 of the instructions. Then we add the torso. This can only really go in one way. So like so. Then we add her face, which is this bit here, I believe. Yeah, sort of face and a bit of her hair. There we go. Such a cool model. Right, then we add her little kissy hand. As she is, of course, blowing a kiss to presumably who she's just shot. Or is just about to shoot. So you can see there's a peg there. It just goes into this hole here. I've had the glue. Focus camera. No, we're not doing focusing. There we go. Alright, then we add her pistol hand. Right, and then add her boat hat. Boat hairpiece thing. And there we go. Again, in my opinion, star of the show. Such a cool model. So last things to do are to add the bases. So the World's Fair Afterparty does come with our standard plastic bases. These are absolutely fine. They're actually quite nice. And because they're plastic glue will glue the model directly to it with no fuss whatsoever. I've actually got hold of a handful of our resin bases though. These are the cobblestone resin bases that we make. And again, we do a whole bunch of designs. We do cobblestones, we do ruined cobblestones, we do decking, ruined decking. So you can really find one that fits the theme and vibe of your character. As they're resin, they're a little bit different to work with, so if I just quickly show you how you work with these as well. But again, the plastic bases are absolutely fine. So first thing we'll do is clean them. Resin will have some mold release agent on it, so it comes out of the mold. Just soaking them in not boiling, but hot soapy water should be fine. Then just scrub them with a toothbrush or something, just to basically get rid of that release agent. So I've already done that. And then you want to clean them up a bit as well, because the casting process, you'll see they're a little bit rough around the edges. All we're going to do is get our knife, like I've been doing all video, and just scrape like this. Just so they are smooth. We occasionally get bits of flash, which is the thing that I think just pinged off. I can show you on this one. There's a bit of what's called flash here, which is essentially just very thin resin that's not part of the design. Those you might want to actually cut away rather than scraping, and then scrape it smooth afterwards. This one is mostly just, again, slightly rough, and that's all. There we go. And then the same sort of test as when we were removing contact points, just running your finger over it and you can feel if it's smooth, which this one is. And I'm going to grab one of my large base models. Let's go back to the monstrosity. So he and the hired muscle go on 40mm bases. Everyone else goes on 30mm. And all we're going to do is just put a bit of super glue on each contact point that he has, and then put them on the base. You will need to use super glue here because the bases aren't plastic. Plastic glue won't do anything. It'll just melt his feet, but won't actually adhere him to the base. So a little bit of super glue on each of his feet and the bottom of his slab. And then position him however you want. I like to sort of look top down and make sure the head of the model is broadly central, which it is there. Press and hold it for a bit. And done. And he is ready for priming. And with that, your Patricians gang is fully assembled, and if you've been following along, your Doctors gang should be fully built as well. With that, and our video on putting together the terrain, you're ready for your first game. But if you want to know how to paint these models, we are going to have some painting videos coming up very soon, where I'll be tackling some of the more interesting characters from the box. If you want to make sure you don't miss that, make sure to do all the normal YouTube stuff, so like the video, comment on it, and make sure to subscribe, just so again you see it when it comes up. Thank you for watching, we'll see you again soon. Goodbye.